Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations, I'm Audley Stevenson, and thank you for tuning into the Audacious Living Podcast. Of course, as you all know by now, this is hands down the most audacious podcast on the internet, and I appreciate you taking some time out of your day and joining us here as we continue our ongoing goal of helping you live your best audacious life ever. As always, I encourage you to connect with us through our social media channels. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram under the handle The Audacious Pod. And if you head over to Facebook and you type in The Audacious Living Podcast in the search engine, you can find us there as well. Of course, if you're watching this episode on our YouTube channel, then you know that you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and receive instant notifications every time we've got new content that comes out. So we make it really, really easy, and I'd encourage you to subscribe, like, follow, share, tell a friend, call a neighbor, do whatever you can. Let's spread the good word about the good things happening here on the Audacious Living Podcast. Now, at one point or another, we all get to that place in our life where we feel like there's a change that's needed. You know, perhaps we're not happy with where we're at personally or professionally in that world, or we need to shake things up. We just feel that something needs to change. Well, that process of creating a new life is exactly that. It's a process that begins with us, and there's no one else that can do it for us. We're going to have to make those changes on our own. Now, we're taking a deeper dive into this topic because I got Purdeep Sangha joining me on the Audacious Living Podcast to have a dialogue around what it means to create a new life and how you do that. Purdeep is a perfect person to chat about this, as you know, he's got this reputation and known for being the strategist for businessmen. He's an advisor and consultant to high-performing executives and entrepreneurs, and he really helps them understand the steps required and what it means to create a new life. He teaches men specifically how to become the complete man, if you will. And the definition of that is a man who achieves ultimate performance, fulfillment, and victory in every area of their lives. He's the author of the best-selling book of the same name, The Complete Man, Achieving Ultimate Performance, Fulfillment, and Victory in Every Area of Your Life. And we'll definitely get into his book and all the key aspects of it, because it really, really is a profound read. I think it's a fabulous topic. I think many of you will walk away with some clear insights and understandings of, again, that whole idea of not only just creating a new life, but one that's victorious. And that's really the key. A victorious life is what we're all after. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Purdeep Sangha. Enjoy. Pleased to be joined by Purdeep Sangha on this week's edition of the Audacious Living Podcast. Purdeep, thanks for being here, man.
Hey, thank you for having me. I totally appreciate it.
Well, and yeah, it's great. I mean, I think the timeliness of this conversation is good. You've got your book out, The Complete Man. I've got The Complete Man, Achieve Ultimate Performance, Fulfillment, and Victory in Every Area of Your Life. That's a big title.
Yeah, exactly. It is, isn't it?
Yeah. Maybe let's get into that. Can you sort of explain what you were going after when you started this venture?
Sure. So when you say the venture, are you speaking specifically around the book or the work that I do?
Well, we're going to talk to the book. Let's start with the book.
Yeah, the book was really, it's something that I wanted to write for a while. I had compiled all this experience, knowledge, training that I've used in my business, for example, in what we do. So we have an advisory service. And I thought it was time to actually write the book. And 2020 was a perfect year. COVID came out. And as soon as that happened, I said, okay, I told my team, okay, we got the stuff that we're doing. Let's work on that. I'm going to focus on two things. A is my family, and B is this book. And so this book was really just, you can say everything just condensed down into a perfect time for me to be able to write a book that would help men live more fulfilling lives, but also perform better, because during COVID, a lot of people were challenged, especially men. And we know that men tie more of their identity to the work that they do, their careers, their businesses. And a lot of people lost their businesses overnight. A lot of people lost their careers overnight. And some people are still struggling. So this book was basically a way to help a lot of men basically reestablish themselves, be able to continue and perform better, achieve everything that they want in life, and be more fulfilled. Because I think ultimately we live this life once. And so we might as well live it to the fullest.
You're absolutely right. We do live it once. And I really like the point around the identity and what men tie themselves to. And it's oftentimes the work that you do or the work that you're involved with. And so when that's no longer there, or that changes even, that can cause perhaps some angst for these men, can't it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It has a huge impact on men. Absolutely. It is a direct blow to who they believe they are and their self-confidence.
Right.
So when things are going well in our jobs or our careers, life is a lot better. But when they don't go so well, then that impacts us significantly. And then it ultimately impacts us on the personal side, whether that's in our marriages or as a family unit as a whole, or how we just operate as people or men.
Yeah. And it's a really good point, raising the connection with our personal and professional lives, because at the end of the day, we are a whole person. And as much as we, want to separate the two, they're still very much, feed into who we are, and, they impact one another.
Oh, absolutely. There is no line down the middle between work and personal life, because they influence each other. Again, it's all about, your focus, your attention, your energy. And when things aren't going well at home, people do bring that to work, as much as they like to think they don't, unconsciously, because that's where the majority of our thinking happens, is at the unconscious level. We don't even realize it. And so all of this stuff is actually in the book that I talk about, for people to have a better understanding, but also have some practical and actionable steps to actually improve where they are right now and where they want to be.
Gotcha. Now, in your book, you have sort of like three pillars, if you will, that feed into the framework. Is that of a complete man, if you will? What did you talk about those? And because I think as I was looking at them, they first off make total sense, Purdeep. They really do, in terms of how they fit into one another, to each of us. And what I really appreciated, that you were labeling it, like you named it, identified it. Because I think sometimes you don't necessarily do that. You just sort of go through the motions, go through life, go through your days, and not recognize that these are three specific pieces of our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially as us as men, we focus on three particular areas. We want to perform, right? We want to perform at our best. That's why we have these sports teams. A majority of sports are played by men, because we're competitive. We want to perform. And we want to be the best version of ourselves throughout our lifetime. And I think one of the biggest, fears that men have is not living basically at their full potential. So performance is the first area. And if you can perform better, even on a daily basis, and improve that, you're going to be better off in the long run.
Right.
And then the next framework is the achievement framework, because there's no point in performing at your best if you're not going to be able to achieve your goals. So if you're a great basketball player, but you're not winning a championship, it kind of sucks. So, you want to be able to achieve something, whatever that is, whether that's a financial goal, a business goal, a family goal, a relationship goal, whatever that is. And here's the challenge, though. A lot of people get stuck in between these two frameworks, especially us men, because we're taught to perform and we're taught to achieve. But we miss out on the third framework, which is the fulfillment aspect. And that is really, truly being fulfilled with life itself, but us as individuals. If you are truly fulfilled with who you are as a person, it doesn't matter what you have on the outside. You still have a joyful life. And that's ultimately what being the complete man is about. And it completes the circle, because most men are bouncing between performance and achievement.
Right.
And if they actually bring the fulfillment aspect in, it literally completes the circle, if you could say, or the pyramid, between these three elements. And when you are more fulfilled, you ultimately have better performance because you have more energy to be able to put into that performance.
Yeah, interesting. When you think about achievement, I mean, so much of I mean, you can use the sports analogy or the basketball analogy, right? Like, I mean, so much of who we are tied to our, how many championships do you have, right? Like, okay, then you're the great player because you got these championships, and that's not necessarily a true measure. But what I find interesting is the fulfillment piece is if you're happy and satisfied, and let's say you don't have any championships, you still could be considered successful.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where things get fun. And life becomes, rather than becoming a struggle or a challenge, it becomes fun, because then you can start fine-tuning your performance, and you can actually start testing your limits and pushing yourself past your limits. And then you start achieving more. So then it becomes a game rather than this big struggle. And that's ultimately where life gets to be a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah, it does. It does. The definition of success, I would also imagine, be very important to this, because people define this success differently, first off, right? And so to some it might be the big house and shiny car, and others it might be quality relationships. How does that feed into that? Because I think for each of us individually, it's not necessarily going to be the same.
Oh, absolutely. I think you just nailed it, because it is not the same. And I think the big challenge out there right now is we try to define what success means for other people. And I don't do that whatsoever. I think that one of the exercises that I do when I work with men is I grill them. I ask them very specific questions, because I want them to come up with the answers. I want them to have clarity about what they truly want and why they want it. Because if you have...
Sorry, sorry to cut you there, Purdy, but when you said you ask these men these questions, are they clear what they want? When you start this process, because you're coaching them, you're working with them, and I'm just wondering, as you ask these questions, how many are really clear on what their answers are?
I would say less than 10% are actually really clear about what they want and why they want it.
That's significant.
Because you can want something, but have two different reasons as to why. And the better the reason, the stronger your commitment, your passion, your drive, your persistence will be, and consistency in trying to achieve it. So let's just use money, for example.
Okay.
Money is great. Money is great to have. And some guys just want money because they feel like they need to have the money. But when you put a purpose behind it to say, I can use this money to give my family a better lifestyle, I can use this money to help other people, to help causes, it's a different driver. Right? So for me personally, money from the perspective of, hey, having a big house or a nice car isn't what drives me. I'm not driven by that whatsoever. What I'm driven by is what I can do with that money. And there's a lot of men out there that have different reasons. And even if you're driven by the big house or the fancy cars, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you acknowledge that yourself and that is the reason why you want to do it. So uncovering those underlying reasons are important, because a lot of times when you outline those underlying reasons, you bring them to the surface, a lot of people change what they want.
Right.
And it truly isn't what they want. And so they find out that they've been working decades trying to get something that hasn't really truly made them happy. And this is ultimately where it comes down to, is what emotions do you want to feel? What emotional states do you want to be in for your life? And if you can outline that, you can actually work backwards.
Yeah. And it's still that the key in that is being clear on what you want, because sometimes even we think this is what we want, or the worldview tells us this is what we're supposed to want, and that's not always the case. And I oftentimes use social media as an example, right, where that tells us all the things that we should be going after in life, and all the things that are important to us. And for some, they get those things and they realize that's not what's making them happy.
No, and that's exactly what it is. I work with men that have massive amounts of wealth. They're extremely, extremely wealthy, but a lot of them don't have the happiness that they're looking for. They don't have the joy. There's men that don't have any relationships with their children or grandchildren. So this becomes a challenge. And I think the sooner we can actually uncover that and create our own path based on our own standards, our own values, and our own desires, the easier it will be to actually achieve what we want. And that's ultimately it, because if you know what you want, you have clarity, you ultimately get the certainty that you'll get there, and you'll actually have the confidence to be able to achieve what you want.
Got you. These men that you work with that are lacking in the other areas, is there sort of common theme that you're seeing amongst them in terms of, why they don't have quality relationships? Or because I mean, oftentimes I wonder, is it because they're so focused on the material or so focused on being success in their career that they miss these other areas? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, there's basically a misconception out there that you have to sacrifice to have the life you want. And I'm all for hustle and grinding. I'm all for sacrificing when it's appropriate. But if your life is a continuous sacrifice, then something's not working out very well. And that's the ultimate challenge, because extended sacrifice takes away from fulfillment.
Right.
And that's ultimately what it is. And so if you can clarify that for men and actually make slight tweaks, whether it's their approach, and here's a simple one: the more hours we put in, right, the more work we're going to get done. No, that's actually not true, because we have to be effective. We have to be ultra focused. We have to have enough energy. So you can actually achieve more in a shorter period of time if you have more focus, if you're actually in what I call the zone. And these are the kinds of things that I train men, is how to have higher productivity in a shorter period of time, so they still are able to spend that time with their family members and not sacrifice to the same extent that they need to, or they have in the past.
Yeah, the focus thing is big, Purdeep. I mean, that was the area that I think that if we paid more attention to, because you're right, it's not necessarily the amount of time that you invested in something, because that's not going to be an indicator, right? It's got to be that focus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Man, you talked a little bit about in your book about the impact of your father and his role in your life. I want to sort of touch on that and provide some context for our listeners.
Absolutely. So my dad is a huge reason, probably the biggest reason why I do what I do. And if it wasn't for my dad being who he was, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have the skills or the experience to get here. My dad he immigrated over from India in the early 70s, came over with $11 in his pocket, had no formal basically couldn't speak English, and he just had a great work ethic and knew how to work hard. So he worked on an orchard with my mom. So she's just right there with him. So when I say my dad, my mom was right there working side by side. And they worked on an orchard. I was born and raised pretty much on an orchard, and they saved up. They eventually bought their own. So my dad became a business owner. But I also saw the struggles that he faced in his life. There was always something missing for him. I could tell from that. And as a result, he used to drink. And so he suffered from alcoholism, right, to the point where it was beyond who he was. So he'd be a great, awesome dad when he was sober, and then a completely different man, even a scary man when he was drunk. And that was very challenging for me as a young boy. So at 8 or 9 years old, I had to learn how to maneuver and understand his behavior. That's truly when I started to study the psychology of man in relationship, and women in relationships, and society, and alcoholism, all these kinds of things, motivation for men. So I grew up with that. I was a person in the household that could calm my dad down. I was the only person. And for some reason, I was kind of like I would even go to sleep with him as a young boy, because if he was just not feeling well, for some reason, my presence calmed him. And so I learned how to navigate around him. I learned his behaviors. I could tell when he was going to drink before he could, I think, even tell that he was going to drink. Oh. I would say to my mom, he's going to drink today. My mom's like, no, he promised he's not going to drink today. I said, I can see his behavior. He's going to drink. And lo and behold, most of the times he would. So this is kind of what led me to where I am. I also had a passion for neuroscience and neuropsychology. And ultimately, when I got out of the corporate world, I saw this behavior in the corporate world too, because I was seeing men struggle at home, and then work too much in their jobs or careers, or struggle in their jobs or careers because things weren't going right at home. So when I left, I was basically, this path was chosen for me, and I could have conversations with men that most men couldn't have. So I can have these conversations about the challenges in relationships and marriages or addictions or all these kinds of things that men face in a very neutral and non-judgmental way, where a lot of guys don't typically share this information with anybody. And so the result of that came from my dad. My dad was also a very big guy.
Yeah.
physically.
Mhm.
He was also, when he was in India, he was in the Indian police force. And he was just a very masculine man. Like, he walked into a room, you wouldn't have to see him and you could feel his presence.
Right.
And he just had that effect on everybody. But he was also very emotional. He shared his emotions with us. He was probably, to this day, the most emotional man I know or knew.
Yeah.
And so he taught me the balance of being strong and masculine, but also being open and vulnerable and emotional. So his dynamics as a man,
Yeah.
both the good stuff and the challenges, is basically why I do what I do and I have the skills that I have. So I owe pretty much everything to him. If he was a perfect father,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be able to do what I do.
Incredible. Incredible. And the fact that at such a young age, you can pick up on these, these cues with him, to have that kind of insight, again, such a young age, that's phenomenal, because it's, I mean, look, at that, 8 or 9 years old, that wasn't me, that's for sure. Understanding of the world, at least developing it, at least.
Yeah, and ultimately, what the biggest catalyst was when he, his goal was to hit 65. That was his goal,
Yeah.
to hit that milestone. That's the pension age, right?
Yeah.
And he was going to say, I came to Canada, I got my pension, I don't have to work as hard. He was always going to work, but just kind of that milestone for him. And we were going to travel, do these family trips, my brother's family, my family, and my parents on an annual basis. But then, because of his alcoholism, it basically accelerated his diabetes, and he died of a sudden heart attack at 64 and a half.
Mm.
And that was a huge wake up call for me. It was a huge wake up call for everybody in a social circle. And the challenge is, I'd like to say that this is a one off, but it's not, because I see a lot of men struggling and waiting till, their entire lives to pat themselves on the back.
Right. Right.
And I don't want to see men do that. I want men to be able to pat themselves along the way so they truly feel fulfilled.
Yeah, there's much to be said about giving yourself credit as you go through the process, as opposed to waiting, right? Like, it's almost, I often talk a lot about sort of celebrating your wins, regardless the size of them. As you go through, you're giving yourself credit, because I truly believe that as you're going through that process of celebrating yourself, you're certainly gaining momentum, right? And you're building, and you're whether it be your confidence or all sorts of things that are built by this momentum gaining process. But then you're also, the experiences that you go through, right? You're building your own resiliency, because we're all going to face challenges. We're all going to come into things and obstacles. And if you're able to say, well, yeah, this looks familiar, I've been here before, and here's how I got through it, or maybe I didn't get through it, but here's why I didn't get through it. And you're able to take on challenges and obstacles. So I'm all for giving yourself credit big time.
Yeah, that's important. We have this belief that, hey, look, we shouldn't pat ourselves on the back too early, right? Because that's going to take away from our motivation. And that's kind of the reverse principle. You can still pat yourself on the back and celebrate,
Right.
and still have a high degree of motivation and drive, and even more. So that's important to do.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. The role of fathers, I mean, and look, we always know how important they are, and certainly your experiences and stories further illustrate that. Even in my world, I grew up without knowing my father for several years, and the first time I met him, I was a father myself, and he was in my life for about 3.5 years, and he passed away by 58. He was gone, and what I find interesting, and only having him in my life that 3.5 year window or so, I learned so much. Certainly about just forgiveness, proving that it's never too late to take action on something. The whole idea, I mean, even his absence in my life as a young boy growing up, I learned. Right, so much like I didn't have the perfect father, but certainly there are a lot of profound lessons I gained from him, and just by him not being, equal, if you will. Like he wasn't. He's far from perfect, but he still learns some great lessons from him.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's, that in itself, 3.5 years can make a huge difference. And I think that's important, because us as fathers, we need to take that role seriously. It's not as bad here in Canada, but it is challenging in the US, where over 50% of children are being raised without full-time fathers. It's a huge epidemic. But you're absolutely right. We have this power and this influence over children, and so do women, but to a different degree. It's a different level, it's a different area. But
It's
having
very rational, I think. Women, is that fair to say? You think like there seems to be a stronger emotional connection. I mean, I look at
Yeah.
Mother's Day. Mother's Day is celebrated. Father's Day is like that's your it's a huge difference, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's more nurturing, right? Because the energy is different. But I know, and speaking to many women as well,
Yep.
right? Women and children, that when you have a strong man in the house, as a father, as a husband, that family feels so much safer, so much stronger, and so much more at peace, you can say, than when that presence is not there. And so that's important for us.
Yeah, no, absentee fathers it is a challenge, and I think sometimes it's not recognized how impactful it is, and obviously, the rest of the support structure that's in place, the mother, whether there are other male figures in that child's life, could come into play, but it does really come back to the fathers, and I think oftentimes because we're so used to them not being there, we don't regard them as being important, but they truly.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. Because I think I don't have very many regrets, but if I was to turn back the clock and do something different in my life, I would have spent more time with my dad. And my grandfather. I would have spent more time learning from their experience, because there's a wealth of wisdom and this is for women as well, but there's a wealth of wisdom that we can learn as men from our fathers. And even from a family, like my father's gone, I don't know all of the history of our family that I probably could have.
Yeah.
And these are important things, because this is what leads to family. And ultimately, it really is. I believe that the crux of society, the basic foundation of society, is built around families.
Right.
And we need to come, that importance, I believe, is falling apart. And we need to bring that together, and have more focus on that. And that does start with us as men.
Yes, it does. How does your work relate as compared to women, like in terms of what the issues that they may face or challenges they may have? How do the two relate to one another?
Yeah, really good question. So I have my counterparts that work specifically with women, and women have similar challenges, similar feelings, but again, they're going through a different challenge themselves, because a lot of women are feeling the pressure to be great mothers, great housewives, and great career women now, right? That's added pressure. A lot of women don't feel like they can just be I'm going to say a homemaker, for example, or take care of children, because there's a pressure to be in a career these days. So women face things slightly different. And here's basically it. Women have different hormones than men do. They operate slightly different. The feminine energy is different than the masculine energy. And I don't work directly with women myself. That's why I have counterparts, because I believe it would be somewhat inauthentic, because I've never given birth to a child. I don't have those high levels of estrogen, for example, to be able to say, I think I have a good understanding, but I wouldn't be able to put myself in those shoes. So I think it would be inauthentic, and I think there'd be better people to serve that. But we have a lot of female followers.
Gotcha.
Huge. And half the feedback that we've gotten from the book itself have been from women. Women are reading it just as much as men are, because they are intrigued. They want to know how to better understand the men in their lives, whether that's their husband or partner, or even their teenage boys.
Yeah, that actually is a really significant point. The teenage boys, think about that next generation, because if we can, I even using my example, like if I was having these conversations at a young age and at my teenage age, and having this understanding of what it means as to when I grow into a man. I'm not gonna say I'm not quite sure how different things would be, but certainly having that understanding I can see where there would have been a change or impact on my life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Daily goals. I think that's another one another point I wanted to touch on, because in all the things that we've discussed, Purdeep, and in terms of, we talk about success and fulfillment, the idea of having goals that we can focus on, or we touched on focus earlier too, but certainly having goals that we can focus on, things that we can go after, because I think when we talk about achievement, right? Part of achievement is, this is the thing that I'm chasing. So what if you sort of touch on the significance of that?
Sure. Everything that we do is based on what we do on a daily basis. And it just makes natural sense to have daily goals because that adds up to our monthly goals or semi-annual goals or annual goals. And so if we're not measuring, if we're not setting daily goals, then we're actually holding ourselves back. So by setting daily goals, it's important and saying, okay, this is what I want to accomplish. This is the outcome, the top 1 or 2 outcomes that I want to achieve. Because that's when our mind starts to think too, because our mind is actually a goal-driven organ.
Yeah.
And so our mind does 2 things primarily. It's a predictive mechanism. It constantly predicts, and it's a problem solver, right? That's what our mind, our brain is programmed to do. But if it doesn't have a goal, then what is it trying to predict? What problems is it trying to solve? It will solve anything else that's thrown your way, like media, marketing messages, social media, family problems, whatever it is.
Distractions in life.
Yeah, basically, ultimately, that's what it is. It's the distractions. So by having a goal, you have more focus, you have more attention, you have a better ability to predict how to get to that goal. You have a better ability to solve problems to get to those goals. And if you do it, the challenge with setting daily goals for some people is that it holds them accountable. And that's ultimately it. It's easier to set an annual goal because this week, well, maybe I didn't make any traction, but at least I got 51 weeks left. Right. And we give ourselves a little bit of a pass. But on a daily goal, it's tougher. We hold ourselves accountable saying, I didn't do what I needed to today. Let me just double it up tomorrow, right? Or do something else. Or, we're just a lot more focused and we're a lot more accountable by having those daily goals.
I remember I got myself a Fitbit. My Fitbit said you got to get 10,000 steps in a day. And at the end of that day, if I got 8, I'm like, that didn't do it today. I got to do better tomorrow, right? So I get it. And it works. I mean, people are always, they're always counting steps, but the idea is, it's an accountability measure, and I think it's an important one. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, absolutely.
One last thing I want to ask you, Purdeep, and I really, really appreciate you spending time talking here about your book and sort of the challenges that men face, and a term that you oftentimes hear in society about what real men do, or how real men are supposed to act, or how they're supposed to behave, and I think there can be some potential challenges with that because of this, this image of what we're supposed to be or what men are supposed to be may not always be accurate or correct. As you go through your work with your clients, is that something that you come across, or how do you help break that down? These I guess misconceptions of what a real man is.
Sure, and I can base it on my perspectives and my personal experience and my learnings, in whether that's technical expertise or a practical experience, is that I break it down to what I call being a mindful alpha male.
Okay.
And that's what it is. And not everybody is this, and everybody has their own path. So ultimately, I believe that every man should be an alpha male. Why? Because the term alpha actually means beginning or origin it's the first letter of the Greek alphabet. So alpha has been misconstrued. The term alpha is really about being the origin or the creator of your life. That is truly it. Taking the lead and saying, I'm going to create the life that I want. Okay. I'm going to be the leader. I'm not going to be the follower. And I believe every man should. Now, I was asked once, well, what happens if every man becomes a leader? Where are all the followers going to come from? And I said, well, what do you think the chances are of every man becoming a leader? It's slim to none, right? We're always going to have followers, and that's nothing wrong with that. But being a leader, you create the life rather than dealing with the circumstances in the life that you feel is given to you, right? Rather than settling. But then there's also the mindful aspect, which is being aware of your actions, being aware of the impact of the things that you do today, not only on yourself, but those people around you and for generations to come, right? And this is really where things are super, super important. So when I say a real man, everybody has their own definition. A real man isn't, hey, look, I don't wash dishes, my wife washes dishes, right? Or I don't clean the house, my wife does that. That's not a definition. Like, I do all of those things. My wife works 12-hour shifts 3 days a week. And so I'm taking care of the kids, I'm washing dishes, I'm cooking for them. Yep. But do I feel like I'm the man of the household? Absolutely. Do I feel like I'm the leader? Absolutely. because that's what my natural state is. And I feel most comfortable, I feel most confident, and I feel most powerful in that state. And it's not from being a control freak,
Right.
but it's my natural state. And I think this is where every man and woman need to understand what that balance is for them. Especially, I'm talking specifically about a relationship.
Yes. Yes.
Because I think there's so much misconceptions out there when it comes to neutrality, especially here in Canada, because we're so sensitive. And that is challenging men, because men are confused on that very topic that you talked about. What does it mean to be a real man? Right. Do I wear the pants in my relationship? Do I not? Am I the breadwinner? Am I not? You have to find, here's what I can break it down to, where you feel most comfortable in your own skin and most powerful. Right. That's ultimately what it is.
Right. And so much again, within the context of the relationship is the relationship helps to also define that, though, our roles. Certainly there are traditional roles that exist. I do this and she does that, vice versa. But again, that's defined by the individuals that make up that relationship. And use the example of washing dishes. Like, there are some men that don't, but that's what's within the context of that relationship. So the outside world can define all they want or tell us all they want what it should be, but those on the inside truly are the ones that define it and make it go.
Exactly. You have to understand what you want. And in all honesty, when my wife and we were getting to know each other, I was very open and honest with her. I said, I'm the guy, because I grew up on an orchard, I'm the outdoors guy, cut the grass, do all that kind of stuff. I don't expect you to touch that. But when we're the indoors, that's kind of my expectation. And if you don't agree, then you don't agree. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But this is the type of relationship that I enjoy. And she was great with that. So she knows that the household, right, that's her responsibility. I'm responsible for everything else outside. And again, there's nothing wrong with having those. And no one can put that stereotype on us, because that's what works for us.
Yeah, it does. And I think a lot of times pressures are put on men because of what this stereotype should be or shouldn't be, right? And you end up chasing this false story or narrative of what your life should look like. And it doesn't have to be that way at all.
Exactly.
Not at all. Purdeep, this has really, really been a great chat. Thank you for spending some time here on the podcast and going through this with me and your book. Perhaps you can let our listeners know if they wanted to check out your book or get a copy, learn more about your work, because you also coach too. So that could be something that you offer as well.
Sure. If you'd like to get a hold of me, I'm pretty much on every social media channel. My handle is typically @Purdeep Sangha. You can also get a discounted version of the book. I can give that promo code to your audience. If you go to completemanaudio.com, you can get the digital combo, which is the ebook and the audiobook, for a 75% discount by using the promo code Victory75. So Victory and then the number 75, all one word.
Got you. Audiobook. By chance, did you do that, or did you?
I did. Yes, I did that. The first book I wrote, I didn't. I had someone do that. Second book, I said, because this is more personable, this is my story, I wanted to do it myself, which was an interesting journey.
I can imagine. Have you done voice work like that in the past? It was the very first time you like that.
Well, we've done promo videos and stuff like that, but doing an audiobook is a completely different game. It is. You're up for a challenge, definitely.
Got you. Well, certainly going to encourage listeners to check that one out, and at the very least hear the audiobook. I think that again, because I know the exercise that it can be, and you're right, it is a challenge. It's nothing easy at all. No. For sure. Purdeep, thanks again for being here. Much appreciated, and all the best.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was great.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Back we are here on the podcast, and I wanted to send my thanks again to Purdeep for joining me here on the Audacious Living podcast, as well as the enlightening conversation. I really appreciated the insights that you shared on what it means to live a complete life and find victory. I think understanding those pillars of performance, achievement, fulfillment are great starting points in creating that victorious life that we all want. Purdeep left us with so much great things to think about, but if there's just one thing I would take from our conversation, it would be this. At some point or another, we all aspire to live an impactful life or be a person of great significance to others. The path to getting there, it isn't always, straight and narrow. There are times when we have to reevaluate our situation because the way we're living isn't in line with the life that we want. So here's the thing. Creating that ideal life, the life that we want for ourselves, is a process that starts with each of us individually. And no one else can step in and tell you how to live your life, nor can they create it for you either. If you want to claim that victorious life, it all starts with you. Hey, listen, if you haven't signed up for email notifications of the Audacious Living podcast and you want to stay connected, then the best way to do that is head on over to bestaudaciouslife.com. That is a website. All you've got to do is enter in your email address and you'll get notifications every time we got brand new content that comes out. It's that easy. And again, the best way to stay connected. To our listeners, as always, I say thank you. Really appreciate the support, the ongoing support, all those who are lovers of audaciousness. I appreciate that you being here with us on this ride, and we'll continue to do our part as you continue to do yours. We've come to the end of another episode, so as a closing note, I'd say once again, as we always do, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.